The image of a god standing in front of a voting booth is fundamentally ridiculous. In the universe of The Boys, Homelander is a being of absolute unchecked physical power. He can fly faster than a fighter jet, survive the blast of a nuclear weapon, and incinerate a massive crowd of people with a single glance. He does not need a passport, he does not pay taxes, and he does not answer to the police. If he truly wanted to conquer the Earth by raw force, he could rip the roof off the Capitol building, melt the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and declare himself the ruler of the world in a single afternoon. The human military would be completely powerless to stop him. Yet, as the story unfolds, we do not see Homelander launching a military invasion against humanity. Instead, we see him playing the slow, exhausting, and deeply human game of politics. He courts voters, speaks at rallies, smiles for news cameras, and schemes behind closed doors to manipulate the presidency. This raises a fascinating psychological question. Why does a creature with unlimited physical power care so much about a political title? Why run for president when you can just take the throne by force? The answer does not lie in a desire for policy or governance. It lies in the deeply fractured, desperately lonely psychology of a man who was built to be a god but raised to be a product. To understand why Homelander needs a ballot box instead of a battlefield, you have to look directly at the room where he was born. He did not drop from the sky from a dying planet, and he was not raised by loving farmers in America's heartland. He was cooked in a sterile Vought International test tube and raised inside a concrete laboratory. He spent his childhood strapped to metal chairs under cold fluorescent lights, surrounded by doctors with clipboards who measured his laser output and blood pressure. He did not have a mother to hold him when he cried or a father to teach him right from wrong. He had a team of corporate scientists who treated him like an expensive piece of machinery. When a child is raised strictly as a commodity, their entire sense of self becomes completely externalized. Homelander only knows he exists if someone else is looking at him, grading him, and telling him he did a good job. He was conditioned from infancy to believe that his value is entirely tied to his approval ratings and his marketability. This is the tragic core of his character. He possesses the physical strength of a god, but he has the emotional stability of a traumatized, abandoned toddler. He does not want to rule the world just to possess it. He wants the world to look at him and tell him that he is loved. This psychological void is precisely why pure military conquest is completely useless to him. Let us imagine what happens if Homelander decides to take the world by force. He flies over Washington, burns down the White House, and sits at the resolute desk amidst the rubble. The next morning, he flies over New York City or London to look at his new empire. What does he see? He does not see stadiums full of cheering fans wearing his cape. He sees empty streets, closed shutters, and millions of terrified human beings hiding in their basements, weeping and whispering about what a horrific monster he is. For a normal warlord or historical dictator, that absolute fear is a highly effective tool of control. But for Homelander, that fear is an existential death sentence. He cannot handle being looked at with pure, unadulterated disgust and hatred. We see this break his mind repeatedly throughout the series. Whenever his public approval drops by even a fraction of a percent, he experiences an intense emotional panic. If he conquers the world by force, he confirms his greatest, deepest fear, that he is a freak, a monster, and a clinical anomaly who can only interact with the world through violence. Pure force creates an empire of absolute silence, but Homelander is an addict who feeds entirely on the roaring noise of an adoring crowd. He does not want your surrender, he wants your adoration. He does not want you to submit to him because you have to, he wants you to choose him. This brings us to the profound difference between a tyrant and an elected president. A tyrant rules because he is strong enough to crush his enemies, meaning his authority is purely mechanical. A president rules because the population voted to hand over the keys to the country, meaning their authority is legitimate. Even though Homelander loudly and frequently proclaims that supes are a superior species and that humans are nothing more than mud people, he is deeply, painfully insecure about his own artificial origin. He knows he is a corporate creation. He knows his American flag cape was designed by a marketing team, and his entire public persona was focus grouped to appeal to Middle America. By achieving the presidency through the established political frameworks of human society, he forces the human world to officially legitimize his existence. It is the ultimate act of psychological revenge against his creators. He is not just breaking the human system, he is forcing humans to use their own system to declare him their master. Winning an election means that millions of people looked at him, knew exactly who he was, and willingly begged him to lead them. It transforms him from a dangerous corporate weapon into an essential historical figure of destiny. Furthermore, Homelander's ambition is deeply shaped by the corporate hierarchy he grew up under. For his entire adult life, he answered to corporate executives who treated him like a sports franchise or a brand of laundry detergent. The most important of these figures was Stan Edgar. Stan Edgar represents everything Homelander detests but secretly respects: pure, institutional, systemic power that does not require physical muscles to operate. Edgar could stand in a room with a being who could vaporize him in a millisecond, look him dead in the eye without a single heartbeat of fear, and call him a bad product. Edgar understood that the corporate and political machinery of Vought was vastly more powerful than any individual superhero. Homelander's pursuit of political office is his attempt to master that exact brand of institutional power. He does not want to just be the weapon that the politicians deploy anymore. He wants to be the executive who orders the deployment. He mistakenly believes that by sitting at the absolute apex of the United States government, he will finally escape the shadow of corporate handlers and prove to the ghosts of Vought that he is truly untouchable. He wants the official titles, the legal immunities, and the historical legacy that only a state apparatus can provide. In the later stages of his journey, Homelander discovers a terrifyingly effective way to achieve this political legitimacy by tapping into the genuine cultural and political divisions of the human population. He stops trying to be the perfect, clean-cut corporate savior that appeals to everyone, and instead leans heavily into becoming a polarizing, populist figurehead. He realizes that a massive portion of the public is angry, frightened, and deeply divided. By positioning himself as their unfiltered champion, the one who speaks their unsaid thoughts and promises to brutally crush their perceived enemies, he builds a fanatical cult of personality. When he lasers a protester in the middle of a crowded street and the crowd erupts into cheers, it is a massive turning point for his psyche. He discovers that his cruelty does not alienate his followers, it binds them closer to him. The presidency becomes the natural tool to codify this fanatical devotion into permanent legal authority. He does not need to wage a war against America, because America is willingly carving itself in half to hand him the reins. The ultimate tragedy of Homelander's political ambition, however, is that the Oval Office is just another cage. He genuinely believes that obtaining the presidency will finally fill the hollow, empty void inside his chest. He thinks that if he achieves the highest office in the world, the crying little boy inside him will finally feel safe. But the reality of political power is messy, bureaucratic, and bound by endless human logistics. A man who can fly across the globe in the blink of an eye is suddenly forced to deal with policy, administration, international treaties, and the mundane mechanics of human society. He wants the crown, but he absolutely despises the day-to-day realities of the kingdom. No matter how many offices he occupies, how many rallies he holds, or how many millions of people chant his name, he can never run away from the fact that he was made in a lab. The presidency is just a larger version of the glass room he grew up in, a highly public stage where he must constantly perform to maintain the illusion of control, forever trapped by his own desperate need for an approval that will never be enough to heal him.